My name is Laura Toole. I am the firm-wide Pro Bono counsel at Jones Day, and I am excited to have an excellent group of people here with me today. We are going to talk about the private sector and incorporating the private sector into detention work. And so my sense is I've been working in immigration space and law firm pro bono space for many years now, like a lot of years. And law firms and particularly as well private businesses tend to be a little bit uncomfortable going to do work in detention centers. And I thought about why that was. And I think people are hesitant because it's really hard, right? It's emotionally really hard. It's physically hard to get to the detention facilities. It can feel very uncomfortable being outside your comfort zone in detention. A lot of people don't feel competent that they have the skill sets to do it. And it feels really uncomfortable. But we decided, Jones Day decided to launch a project in a detention facility. And through that process, we've been about a year and a half into that. We've had the pleasure of expanding our work. So Luke here is from Goldman Sachs, and they have been joining us in our detention work on the ground. Serge is a partner in our Brussels office, and he launched the U.S. project that we started. He is replicated in Lesbos, Greece. And, oh my God.
Kelina.
From Hayes is here. And she leads our work in Lesbos, Greece. So I'm super excited to talk a little bit about detention work and how the private sector can get involved and why it can be actually, instead of uncomfortable for the private sector, it can be attractive to the private sector. So first, I want to tell you a little bit about this project that we started in the U.S. I'm going to keep it short because I'm sure you're less interested in the U.S. project and more interested in the European project, but to give you a little context, we started this project a year and a half ago on the border between the United States and Mexico. We started right after the election. We had been involved in immigration work for a long time, but decided to branch out to adult detention in about February of 2017. We found a detention facility that's all women. It's one of the first places that the women detainees come when they arrive in Texas before they have their interviews and their further proceedings. This is kind of the first spot where they are detained. There were no free legal services there at all, like nothing. So they have no access to make phone calls out unless they already have money. Even if they have money to put on a phone card, they don't know who to call and they don't have access to the internet. They have no way to look up phone numbers for lawyers. The numbers that they were given by the government, there were 3 of them. None of them worked. They all went to either answering services, which detainees can't call, or to a private lawyer who had no idea why his name was on the list. So they had nothing. They had no free legal services at all. And so we started going down to visit the facility. We eventually got to a place where we were allowed to do Know Your Rights presentations. So every Monday night, the women over the weekend can sign up to come to a presentation. We do a presentation to them on Mondays. We have anywhere from 50 to 120 women that sign up each week. We do a full Know Your Rights presentation on Monday, sometimes Tuesday and Wednesday if there's too many of them to fit in the room and we have to do multiple nights. We then meet with as many of them as we possibly can before they're transferred on to their next facility. So we give them information about what's happening to them, why they're being detained, and we prepare them for their next stage in the proceedings, which is typically a fear interview by the U.S. Asylum Office. They go on, so we've seen over 5,000 women in this process, and we've taken about 280 cases for full representation, and we're representing them all over the country. But the focus of our project is to provide information and advice on the spot. And so we rotate in teams of lawyers every week. So every week, we have 2 partners, 2 associates, and 2 translators that go down to Laredo. And they arrive on Sunday, they get trained Sunday night, they work Monday through Friday, they leave Friday afternoon, they're done. They have no ongoing commitment, and they will tell you that they are transformed from a week of providing services in the detention centers. The work is emotionally draining, and the experience is just overwhelming for them. We do reflections on Thursday night, and we can not make it through a Thursday night without tears. Somebody is crying on Thursday night, and it's usually the older male partners, seriously. It's a really extraordinary experience. We've talked a little bit about it, and when the family separation issues came up in the U.S., which some of you likely have heard about, we started getting calls from many of our clients. But even before then, we've been talking with clients about the work that we were doing, our paying clients, and they started asking if they could get involved. Our first client to get involved was Goldman Sachs. And since then, we've had many others follow, including JP Morgan, Williams, Sonoma, SunPower, and others. We have a lot more Chevrons on deck. There's a bunch more companies that are on deck to come. It's a great experience for them. Their lawyers don't have to be barred in Texas. They just have to be barred somewhere in the United States. They can come for 1 week and then they're done. But in that week, they've gotten an extraordinary experience. And so we've found that this detention model is actually working really well for our lawyers to get really great on-the-ground experience, provide a great service, and that it's been really attractive to our private company partners as well. And so that's kind of a brief introduction to our US-based project. And the focus of this really is to kind of tell you about a couple of these different models and how both the private bar, our firm, has been able to get involved, and other firms can get involved in this type of detention work, but also how private companies can get involved. So, Luke, I'm going to turn it to you from the Goldman Sachs perspective. Tell us about why you're interested in pro bono work, why you guys came to visit Laredo, and what your future plans are.
Yeah, thank you. And look, you guys are the stalwarts, so thanks for going the distance. It's appreciated. I am Executive Director and Senior Counsel in Litigation at Goldman Sachs. I'm also co-head of the Pro Bono Committee in London. And our Pro Bono Committee was started about 10 years ago through passion. There was nothing there, and there's a group of people who just decided they wanted to make a difference. They wanted to change things. So they set it up, and they tried to make it work, and that's what we've tried to stay faithful to. So our aim, really, is to support a range of good causes that we feel passionate about in a way that best uses our pretty broad skill set, and that's going way beyond law, including non-lawyers and all the other skills that we have. In terms of why we want to help generally, we see it as our duty and our privilege. I mean, frankly, we are lucky to have the skills we have, and it's the right thing to do. But there's hugely a selfish element as well. We consider that we find it rewarding, and it really improves retention for our people. They enjoy doing this. This is why it's an offering we give our lawyers. As to why we are particularly focused on immigration and refugees, again, it's driven by passion. In 2015, we had a migrant crisis, and yeah, the numbers might have dropped, but we kind of forgot about it in the UK. We had Brexit in 2016, and we got a little bit caught up in that. So we'd gone from a position in the rhetoric where we'd moved on from this idea of swarms of people coming in. I can't remember who coined that phrase, but it's a horrible phrase. And we'd moved to actually recognizing that it was people, and then we forgot all over again. So in the UK, we feel particularly passionate about it. There are the challenges that we face in the UK, undoubtedly, especially in the immigration space and the restrictions there. So we focused on three main streams. We've got a mentoring program with Kieron. So Kieron offers an e-learning program for refugees, and it's great. And the thing I love about this is that the mentoring picks up when all the other support framework falls away. So all the great work that Alina does in terms of the asylum applications, once that support falls away, then this mentoring program kicks in. We have our Connect virtual legal advice clinic with Centrepoint and Herbert Smith, where we've set up the clinic, but we've also connected Toynbee Hall with Centrepoint, so there's an asylum, an immigration law offering there. And then we're clearing our internal approvals to work with the International Refugee Assistance Project, which is another fantastic move. In New York, what the team there are doing is hugely enterprising. I'm so amazed every time I hear about the Jones Day collaboration. And talking with the lawyers who have been down to Laredo, the Texas-Mexican border, I think the thing that strikes them is the impact they can have. So I think there's a real concern, actually. They're well outside their comfort zone. They don't have the expertise. They don't necessarily have the resources. And this is where people think that that's the end of the offering, but it's not the case at all. What they find is that they can offer such a useful service in listening, providing information, helping with referrals, so helping articulate the client's case, and they really have that impact. So it's been great for us and great for our people in seeing that. Frankly, I think as well as being rewarding and inspiring, it does make them better lawyers. It really hones their essential skills that we don't do enough. The client interviewing, the picking out the issues, the building an argument, all that great stuff.
Thank you. We're going to come back around because I have questions for you. But Alina, can you tell us a little bit about the highest project in Lesbos, Greece, so that we bring it back to Europe?
Okay. So HIAS has been providing services to refugees for more than 100 years now, I think 130 actually. The office in Lesbos opened in 2016 around the EU-Turkey statement. I don't know if I can briefly tell you what the EU-Turkey statement is. So 2016, 20th of March, the EU and Turkey issued a statement that said that Turkey is a safe third country to apply for asylum. Therefore, people who arrive to Europe couldn't be sent back to Turkey. So upon arrival in Europe, you're assessed about whether you can apply for asylum in Europe. If not, you're readmitted back to Turkey. So in exchange, the European Union would provide funding for Turkey to host refugees in there. So the presence of lawyers from 2016 onwards became precious, actually, on the island to ensure that asylum seekers had access to international protection and that the quality of this procedure was high, as it of course should be. So we started providing legal aid in Lesbos in 2016. What we do is counseling and support throughout the asylum procedure, so all the way from first instance, second instance, and to the relevant courts if necessary. We provide support to people in detention, so our involvement with detention is actually threefold. You have administrative detention, which is a new project. They call it the Low Profile Project. Single males who arrive in Greece, or who arrive on the shores of the European Union, are administratively detained if they have a recognition rate under 25%. This 25% is released by Eurostat and it's updated. So countries which are not typically considered to be refugee-producing countries will be in detention until their asylum procedure is processed, which can take somewhere from a month to 9 months, 12 months, whatever. Unless they have a good lawyer, right? And then the second part of our involvement with detention is the increasing incidents of hate crime that are occurring on the island. So following racist attack on a protest mainly by Afghan nationals to do with the conditions in the Moria camp, there was a racist attack and 120 people were actually detained after being attacked. So we are representing these 120 people. And our third involvement with detention is before people get readmitted to Turkey. So a couple of days before people are sent back to Turkey, so if they have a rejection at last instance, or if they voluntarily decide that they want to quit their asylum procedure, they are sent back to Turkey. So our involvement comes in there to ensure that that all the legal remedies have been followed and people had just and fair access to asylum. We also provide legal information on an individualized basis in detention centers and outside detention centers. We do strategic litigation. We do have a case relevant to detention, actually. This is the third case of strategic litigation we've done, because there are people who are administratively detained for very long periods of time because their asylum interview is pending, because the National Asylum Service does not have the interpreter for the asylum interview. So it's basically quite rare languages that you usually find in Africa. So people remain in detention for no reason until their asylum interview is scheduled. That is what we do.
That's a lot.
Very brief.
That's a lot.
I think I said it really quickly.
It was perfect.
But yeah, if you have any questions, because it's, I talk about it very quickly, and assuming that people are acquainted to refugee or asylum law. But if you have any questions, please feel free.
And we'll go last to Serge, who is a partner in our Jones Day Brussels office, who designed a way for us to work with first the European Bar Association and then with HIAS to provide services in Lesbos.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. Yeah, so my name is Serge Clerks. I'm a partner at Jones Day in the Brussels office, and I'm actually a competition lawyer, an antitrust lawyer. My daily bread and butter is merger control, so it's not migration law. And that's the whole point of tonight. It's really to see how the private sector, also private law firms, can get involved in hopefully a meaningful fashion in an area of law where help is absolutely needed, but which is very far from what we do on a daily basis. Now, I have to say that when the whole migration crisis started in Europe 4 or 5 years ago, there immediately has been a very keen interest from the firm, also from the management, so from Laura, to intervene. And no doubt that was partially through what Laura had implemented at the Mexican border in the United States for Latin American refugees. The only thing is that it's not straightforward to intervene as a business law firm. You need to find a match, you need to find a project which is a match from a substantive perspective, and also it has to fit well in the overall firm management structure. And from a substantive perspective, well, there's obviously a problem, right, is that we're not migration lawyers. So we have good people, we have good lawyers, at least we tend to believe in it, and I personally am convinced we have good lawyers. You know, they speak multiple languages, they're very committed, they work very hard, but they're not migration lawyers. So, you know, facing that difficulty, you immediately realize that you need to partner up. And we have partnered with HIAS. We had partnerships before that, but ultimately we ended up with HIAS, and HIAS was also a trusted partner on other projects around the world. So we knew each other. And that helped us intervene in a meaningful fashion, because obviously, as I said, we're not migration lawyers, but also we're not Greek qualified lawyers. So we cannot take on individual representations on the island of Lesbos within the asylum, or overall asylum admissions process. But I have to say, and Elena, correct me if I'm wrong, but I have to say that within the scope of what you can do, there's a lot of value you can add. It's not because you can't take on individual representations that you can't be useful. If you are a clever person and you are committed to something and you have a law degree and you understand the law overall, you can get the hang of it pretty quickly. And we get briefings from HIAS on the ground, and HIAS obviously has very qualified people on the ground that very quickly allow us to intervene in a meaningful fashion, whether it is by just providing basic information on, you know, what people's rights are, how the process works, what the admissions criteria are. You have to understand that people that come there, people often think, well, these people know what they're doing and they're well briefed and they're coached. This is absolutely not the case, right? You are dealing with people that come there in full distress, right? 60% are women, minors, women, children, unaccompanied minors that have gone to very great trauma. They distrust everyone, right? And once they get there, if there is someone that's there just to listen, as Luke mentioned, and that, you know, can make people feel at ease, and you don't need to have a migration background to do that, but make people feel at ease and then provide basic information, that is useful in itself. Now, what we also do, or what our lawyers also do, is provide assistance to the HIAS lawyers in briefing them for their interviews, which is obviously a very crucial stage in the whole process. Collect and inform people about the right documents they need to have. We can also conduct ad hoc specific researches, etc. So there is quite some scope for added value here by committed but non-migration lawyers. And so that's where we thought that there would be a fit, and what we set up is just a program that is targeted to mainly all our European lawyers, and we have 8 offices in Europe, more than 400 lawyers in Europe, so there is quite a substantial pool we can fish from. And our aim and our goal, and we actually succeed in doing that, is to send 6 to 8 lawyers to Lesbos on the ground for each for periods of 3 weeks. And this is the first year, no, it's actually almost the second year we're doing it. And it has worked well. I have to say that from a firm management perspective, the fact that you don't take on individual representation helps, right? It helps because, there's no conflicts of interests. It helps for all sorts of administrative and insurance purposes and malpractice purposes, you name it. Overall, I have to also say that in terms of expenses, the expenses are very limited because the cost of living on the island is cheap, it's low. And in the end, the big chunk, the big expense is the lack of billable hours. But that's obviously a whole other matter. And when there is a willingness to intervene, those things become very, very trivial. So another point in terms of what I need to stress, it's following what Elina said with respect to the firm management and so on, is that Lesbos overall is a safe place as well, right? We're not sending people to more dangerous camps that you can find in the Middle East. So overall, of course, there are riots once in a while. There have been riots in Mytilene, so the city itself, but they remain very limited. There are riots sometimes in the camps, but they are overall containable and contained and limited. So we're not sending our lawyers to an unsafe place. If it were a true unsafe place, we wouldn't do it probably, because the risk would be too high, and if you have a failure in that respect, the whole program would collapse. So we need to be mindful and watchful for these things, but overall it works well on the island of Lesbos. And also, by the way, when there are riots, it's the target of those riots are not the people helping, right? It's not those that provide humanitarian or legal assistance. It's mostly ethnical, really, within the camps between the different communities. Or otherwise, what you also have is sometimes in Mytilene, at least in March or in April, I think there were extreme right marches, which are things that can happen, right? I mean, if you have a small island where suddenly you have 10,000 refugees stuck in camps and also roaming around the city, you will see those things. But overall, it's a safe place. In terms of benefits that we get from it, and I'll stop, but the benefits are multiple. I think, obviously and hopefully, there is a benefit to the refugees in the added value that we can have. There is certainly a benefit to our lawyers. When our lawyers come back, and it has been mentioned here as well, notably by Luc, I wouldn't say that they're transformed, but it's certainly they're facing situations they've never faced before, for most of them, if not all of them. They've seen aspects of life, of society that they didn't know before. And all of them have come back, not so much in thinking that they've added so much value, but they did somehow feel useful, and I think they were useful. It made them a different person, hopefully a better person, but a different person for sure. It has had an impact on their lives. And I tend to believe that by sending our lawyers there, they will come back with a more holistic view of things, which also makes them better lawyers. As a law firm, overall, we see tremendous benefit because we view ourselves as a legal institutions. We have more than 2,005 lawyers around the world, and we don't do just business law. We are a player on the legal market, and as a player on the legal market, we pride ourselves in seeking to assist towards the right interpretation, the right implementation of the law, or at least try to help creating a sort of a level playing field for people when facing the law. And by those projects, certainly with what's happening in Laredo on the Mexican border, and to a lesser extent because it's of lesser scope in Lesbos, we hope that we can meaningfully contribute to those fundamental pillars of society and of the rule of law.
Can I add something to the context now that you said about 2,000 lawyers? So there's currently around somewhere between 9,000 and 11,000 refugees, asylum seekers rather, in Lesbos. There are 15 practicing refugee lawyers, and there is no right to legal aid at first instance. So you can understand the discrepancy. So obviously any extra lawyer is welcome.
We'll fill a camp.
Yeah, decided that.
Can I add something as well to the point about losing the billable hours? I mean, for us as a client, it's something that we're increasingly expecting from our law firm, so a commitment to this type of thing and to diversity. And actually, it's hugely inspiring for us when the people we are instructing, we're collaborating with them and working with them on this type of initiative. It's fantastic. It's the best way for us to build a relationship.
Yep. No, and of course we are aware of that, and that may be a selfish thing, but
if it contributes to
exactly.
good outcomes,
if we can, exactly. If it all can contribute to more help where it's needed, all the best, all the better. But I have to say that the lack of billable hours in the whole project there's never been more than half a line that has been written on that. It's totally trivial. No one cared, and that wasn't the issue at all. I have to say.
Well, there's kind of two things about that to me. One is every person who goes down to and spends time in one of these two detention facilities goes back and tells their friends, their colleagues at church, their colleagues at work, their family members about what they experienced. And we spread the word, and people can understand the plight of others in our society who we might, particularly in the United States, we're using a lot of language these days about who those people are, and they're other and vermin and all kinds of things that we talk about in our public media. And to go down and meet these women and touch them personally and then come back and tell those stories, I think is really impactful. And so for each instance that we get to do that, and whether that's adding more Jones Day lawyers, more clients, every new person that goes down to me is a way of spreading information and spreading the word about work. And then on the sort of more business development side, in my view, the week that we spend together in Laredo is a completely different experience than going to like the Super Bowl and like having a big party and drinking a lot and hanging out. Right? You're spending a week working side by side all week, and you're sharing your heartfelt moments. You're choked up at some points. You're celebrating because somebody gets released from detention, and you have a moment of some joy. Those kinds of experiences where you're collaborating with your client is really different than our regular attorney-client relationship, or going to celebrate something at a game or something like that. And so it's a really unique way to bond with others. So as you're thinking about these as a nonprofit of pitching, or as a law firm as thinking about partnerships, I think those are important. I have a lot of questions for my panel, but we really want this to be a discussion with you guys. If you guys want to chime in, I'm happy to.
Great. Thank you very much. It was really interesting, and it was very interesting also to see this project. And I have two questions. One is, we do, I'm working with the law clinics and so university law students to go also to detention centers. So we have two kind of detention centers. We have the immigration detention centers in the different countries. I am working in Italy, so we have 13, one in Turin, for example, at immigration detention center, which is separate from the normal prison. And we also go to the prison, provide legal services for asylum seekers inside the prison. So my first question is, at the moment we do work with pro bono lawyers, but they're more migration lawyers at the moment. We don't have any kind of connections with more people from outside, and it would be interesting to understand whether this would be a possibility and how we actually could engage things like this. And of course, in Italy, we do have also the hotspots in the southern part of Italy with a lot of similar problems that Greece has. So there is a lot of development that could be actually done. And the second question relates to when we built up our session on refugee law clinics going global, which was just the last session that we had. We actually had in the very beginning, we tried to connect with Innovation Law Lab. I don't know if you know them. And I wonder, I was really interested, and we couldn't really bring him here. Steve Manning, I think, was the man who was organizing it. And I found it really interesting what he's doing on the Mexican border, trying to make a sort of network, if I just summarize it correctly, a network of lawyers, different types, being available on a different spot, in a different detention facilities on Mexican side or on the American side, to provide services and to be there in front of the prison if the need is. So this is something which I found very interesting. And do you collaborate with them? Is this something that might be transportable in another context like Europe? This is a question mark.
So on the law students, I'll jump. I don't know if you've used law students yet, so I'll start, but then I'll transfer. Okay. So on the U.S. side, several of the detention facilities that have structured programs bring in law students all the time. And so oftentimes it's for a week at a time. We've used some law students in our project. There's family detention facilities near us, and those projects have law students flowing in all the time. We also have law students that have spent a semester with us, and so who will come do a semester internship or externship, I guess, with us. And so I think there are some really unique opportunities and maybe something to explore of ways to incorporate law students into those types of projects. A lot of times in the U.S. they're doing it like at their spring break or their summer holiday or their winter holiday or what have you.
Laura, can I add to that? So a lot of the best successes we've had are non-lawyers. So a lot of our analysts, and that's in terms of, really slamming the lawyers. But in terms of the Spanish speakers going down to the Texas-Mexican border, they didn't have any immigration or experience. They weren't qualified lawyers. But actually, some of the best success stories we've had from them, because they were able to listen, they're able to build that rapport, they're able to provide information. Similarly, in the UK, we're under really tight restrictions in terms of what we can and can't do, and that's where we found solutions where we don't need to give immigration law advice. We can help guide people through the process. We can mentor them in other ways. So I don't know if those are any options. Sorry, I'll pause there.
We have the Jones Day lawyers with us for 3 weeks, which is it's obviously not a good enough period for someone to become an expert on refugee law, obviously. But we have a training material for them, which they read either before or upon arrival, and they shadow the lawyers for 1 or 2 days, and then you start giving work according to what they know, right? So you build it up slowly. But the 3-week period is a good period, because it's actually quite complicated. Like the asylum procedure in Greece, like in Italy, at this moment is quite complicated. So
Alina, what if we had talked about this earlier, what if the law students spoke French or Greek or Arabic? Or French and Greek are the two that you primarily need?
Greek is a wonderful asset, but I understand that
not many people... Do you see how her face lights up when she says Greek?
Greek-speaking lawyers, yes. Greek would be amazing, but I understand that there are many people around the world who speak this language, right? French, Arabic, or Farsi. I mean, refugee-speaking... refugee language is obviously great.
Yeah, so that might be something to think about too as you're working in law students is they may not be able to jump in and do the legal work right away, but they can be a translator to the lawyers. Then they learn what the lawyers are doing, and then they start to be able to step in and do some other substantive work. And we can talk separately about law labs, but they're creative, doing some really interesting stuff, building databases, building connections, and there's a lot of progress still to be made, but a lot to learn from what they're doing. So happy to talk with you about that. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Andreas. I'm from the Refugee Law Clinic Berlin. I don't know whether you've heard of the Refugee Law Clinics. We are basically every larger German university now has one. We provide a training in European and German asylum law, and have counseling experience afterwards. A lot the same as you do on the administrative stage. We don't do appeals or anything like that because we're not qualified yet. And in the beginning of this year, we started a counseling project on Samos, because on Samos there was no one except for 2 or 3 lawyers from the Greek Refugee Council and Mehmet El Razi, who basically do appeals, but no one really does the interview preparation, and on that stage also a bit family reunification, where we are not very well situated because we have the ties to Germany and a lot of people need to go to Germany through family reunification and vulnerability cases. So my question is, first of all, I would love to see whether there's any way to match up projects and cooperate. And second, are there any intentions of expanding this to the other islands, for example? Because there's a very good project on Chios, Refugee Law Clinics abroad, and there seems to be amazing projects on Lesbos. But then there are other islands, and especially Samos there's been an upshot of people who were coming. I mean, when I counseled there half a year ago, it was 2,000 people. Now it's 5,000 to 6,000 people in a camp designed for 700 people. I mean, I'm sure you know about it, so it would be amazing to see whether we can sort of connect in order to also cover other islands and possibly, I mean, if we think this larger, also Italy, Spain, where similar problems occur.
Yeah, there's definitely a need out there, right? I guess it's always a question of funding, really. I mean, you don't get, massive amount of people who want to fund legal aid. Like it's not the most interesting of things.
One advantage that the refugee law clinics can provide. I mean, we do have, especially in the European procedures, as the European law is concerned, we do have the training. And we have a pool of, by now in Germany, about 1,000 counselors who are all willing. I mean, we set up this project within weeks, basically, because we can send calls for volunteers, and people want to come and work for free. Most of them are students, trained and experienced in counseling, and they're willing to go during the semester breaks, which in Germany are pretty long. So they can stay for, some people are staying for 2 or 3 months. We have also lawyers in Germany who are willing to go then for shorter times but specialized in the field. I mean, I think there are ways to make the funding more affordable. What we do need funding for is legal supervision. And that will be a question to the institutions with a bit more money, because we don't have a lot of money. Whether you seem to have been establishing an incredibly well-working cooperation in that regard. Would love to see whether there's any way to do that. But tap into our resources.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. It's a good connection, so we'll have to follow up on that. Go ahead, Serge.
Just to follow up on that, there is money and there is funding. I think you need to think how you can engage a law firm, for example, or a company. And as usual, you need to see what can be the benefits from law firms are looking for those types of projects, frankly. So and they're not, as I said, not always easy to find. Now, if you can provide a certain training to junior associates or mid-level associates at a law firm, and they're involved in the work that you're doing, and the same for you, because I think the question was also the flip side, right? So how can law firms help you? I'm sure that once you get that connection, once you partner up, the funding can come because there is money. So, but I think that's the way. That's really the inroad, is to see, okay, how can I connect a law firm through training, through help that they provide, and they're looking for that. That's really, I think, the way to try to do it. Yeah. And congratulations, by the way, friend.
How would you suggest to approach law firms with that?
Well, I think you have to do it as usual, very proactively and very bluntly, right? I mean, there's no, let's be clear on this. I mean, that's the way we do it. You know, each law firm has a responsible person for pro bono, right? And if you have large law firms, you have them in the several offices as well. You know, you advertise what you're doing, and what you're doing is great. So you make a sort of a brochure, short, punchy, and then you approach that person and you say, listen, this is what we're doing. Those are the problems we're facing. This is the type of, and I wouldn't call it partnership at first, but this is the type of assistance that you could provide, and so on. So that's really the way I would do it. Yeah.
Other questions? Yes, and then we'll come to this side next.
Hi, I'm Nimrod from Hayes Israel. I have a question as someone who's trying to sell pro bono to law firms. When we try to measure success, and we do it often, we count our clients, we count how many success we have in court, how many clients gain visa, etc. And you talked about how attorneys who take part in these projects benefit emotionally or working in the firm, taking part in this project. And I was wondering if you do anything else measuring the success.
Measuring the success of these projects?
I mean, you have many criteria which may be relevant. Big clients who are happy about you taking part of this project, or lawyers who keep working for you because they enjoy the work.
Right. I mean, there's lots of different ways, right, that the project is beneficial. The first is the number of women that we are serving and the impact that we're having on individuals. And we calculate those numbers and we keep track of them. We also look for impact. We were looking for a project where we would be able to impact a large number of people in a way where we're on the border, we're seeing firsthand all the things that come through, so we're able to really watch the law. So I think that we're able to have a larger impact on responding to and dealing with legal issues that arise at the front end. So we were looking for something impactful in terms of the legal structure. We were hoping that others would follow us, and we have some examples of some firms that are doing that, that are going to be doing things that are like us. They're not following us, but they're looking at the way we're doing it and using some of what we've learned as examples of ways to build on and do better, but to get into detention facilities. And so so there are a lot of different ways to measure it. That clients want to come is great, that our lawyers are more satisfied with their lives because they're giving back is great. None of those is the decisive factor, but we wanted to do something that was strategically important and that was impactful and that made a difference in the world. And particularly, as Serge said earlier, it's really about the rule of law, right? So this isn't about policy issues. This is about making sure that there's access to the rule of law for people who deserve it. And we believe that refugees fleeing their home countries deserve access to the rule of law. And that is also what brings us to Lesbos on a smaller scale, but similar motive. Does that answer your question? Go ahead.
Thank you. Hello, good afternoon. My name is Oktay Durukan. I'm the Director of Refugee Rights Turkey. We are the leading NGO legal assistance provider for asylum seekers and detained migrants on the Turkey side of that very difficult border. We also function like a clearinghouse vis-a-vis the state-funded legal aid scheme in Turkey. We refer asylum and migration, immigration detention cases to bar associations around Turkey and try to support legal aid lawyers, including by way of a help desk that we run, particularly for legal aid lawyers. And we are here at the forum first time with a view to developing an understanding of the potentials of pro bono legal services in the Turkey context, in a collaboration with our American sister organization, Refugee Solidarity Network. We are currently exploring developing pro bono partnerships in Turkey to mobilize another capacity out there on top of our own direct services, what is available from the legal aid system, whether we can mobilize this supplementary capacity to increase the supply of legal representation available to asylum seekers and particularly detained migrants. Now, I would like to take advantage of this opportunity to encourage Hayes, Jones Day, several clinics that are working on the EU side of that migration nexus to be in touch with us, particularly in terms of preparing individuals at risk of return to Turkey as to what awaits them once and if they end up in a Turkish immigration detention facility, and particularly if they would already know to call us, to reach out to us if that possibility is there. We have a team of lawyers. We have a good network of legal aid lawyers around the country to engage those cases and possibly have a chance to carry out legal interventions to prevent onward return to unsafe countries. So with that, I would very much like to connect with any of you who would see value in that kind of partnership. And aside from that, we really benefit a lot from the experiences elsewhere in terms of mobilizing pro bono partnerships to really generate a lot of value in our field. And I just have so much sympathy with my colleague working on the Greece side of his, the highest colleague, when you basically shared the big picture in terms of numbers. 11,000 refugees on the islands, 15 practicing lawyers. That is in a way, the proportion that we are working with in Turkey. 4 million asylum seekers, refugees, and migrants altogether. And in comparison, a very insignificant supply. And that's what we're working on. Thank you.
Hi, so my name's Amy Grumsky. I work at ORIC. I'm the head of International Pro Bono. We are starting a program much like yours in January next year with another organisation. So I just have a couple of questions so that we can learn from from how you're doing it. So we really struggled with the length of time that we could have lawyers out of the office we're sending them to Athens. So I just wanted to ask, in terms of those 3 weeks, are your lawyers being given fee relief for reducing their billable hour targets for the month or for the year, or are they expected to still do the same amount of billable? Because 3 weeks is quite a long time. And then secondly, do you contribute financially to the training and supervision time that would be required to have the lawyers there? And then also, just to clarify, the number of lawyers that you're sending. So you're sending 6 to 8 lawyers every 3 weeks, so there's always lawyers there, or how, yeah, if you could clarify that too, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah. So the first question, each law firm has its targets in terms of billable hours and so on, and some are a bit more flexible than others. To be fair with you, it's never even been an issue. So we know that we appreciate when those lawyers volunteer, and it's taken into consideration in a very favorable fashion when we evaluate them. And there's no one in his right mind that would start saying, hey, but those billable hours, those hours have not been billed, etc., and so your targets are not met, etc. So that's it. The second question is, no, we do not intervene financially in the training that Hayes is giving. What we do is, of course, we do pay everything which is out-of-pocket money and spend on the island. So it's lodging, restaurant, food and beverage, and then the travel costs. There's even sort of a small per diem. The third question, no, that would be a lot. Now, we send 6 to 8 lawyers on a year, per year, right? And each lawyer that goes stays for 3 weeks. So typically in the first 6 months of the year, we send 5, and then there's always 1 or 2 or 3 weeks between each. It's one at a time.
In the Texas project that we're doing, we send 6 or 8 at a time every single week. The Lesbos project is much smaller, so that project we send one at a time.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course, there would be quite some benefit in sending more and making sure that there's an overlap between the people going, because then, one lawyer can train another lawyer, right? And they would help each other. But it's just technically not possible to the extent that, we can't send 30 lawyers a year.
I mean, we only have 3 lawyers in the office, right? So you have to think about the capacity. I mean, you have to do the work that you're doing, and then you also have to train the lawyer and help him and start working himself, herself. So I guess if we had 6 lawyers, then you could be able to have 2 volunteers on 2 pro bono lawyers. But with a capacity of 3, it's quite small.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? So, Luke, I have a question for you. This issue is political, and when I get questions that come to me about our firm being involved, and people say, "Oh my gosh, you have clients that go to detention," tell me how you think about the issue and the politics that surround this issue.
It's such a good question. I thought you might ask something like this, and I think we are massively helped by strong leadership. So we have the support of our leaders on the legal side and on the business side. And actually, I don't know if you saw Lloyd Blankfein's tweet when the executive orders came out. I mean, that is great to see your CEO at the time standing up for orders that we really don't believe in and actually being public about it. And when you've got someone doing that, suddenly it empowers us to do all the pro bono work with you. And I think the other thing is we hugely leverage our law firm partners to work really effectively. And I think everyone can see the benefit. It's certainly something we have to manage, and it's difficult to manage. But with strong leadership, I think it's easy, and it's the right thing to do. And we come back to that moral compass question every time.
Thank you. Alina and Serge, you talked about having really a small staff, and I know there's challenges with having new people come in. So tell me a little bit about the flexibility that we've experienced on our side, Serge, and that you guys can think about or creatively work with to make these types of detention projects. And maybe I'm not necessarily asking you to offer for your detention project specifically, but in these types of projects, how accommodating can you be to allow law firms and corporations that can't send somebody for a month or 6 months at a time but want to contribute and want it to be meaningful?
I think that it's a working relation, right? So you have to listen, both sides have to listen to what the needs of one is and what the needs of the other, and we've done that.
You said Serge even listens to you whine.
Yes.
She never whines. I don't know where it's coming from.
Don't whine. It's like you're not listening. You don't whine. So we try to accommodate each other's needs.
Easy.
So that's very important, because you have to be, wanting to help. So the do no harm principle is more important than wanting to help. I'll be very blunt. It's great that people want to help, but you have to show respect to the people who are there on the ground every day for months and listen to them. So upon arrival, we have a great training booklet. We have the reading material. And we try and curb their expectations from before to what they are to expect and what they are not to expect, what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do. We're a bit strict, actually. It sounds like we're a bit strict. That's how we make it work. And it's a bit like you're hosting someone for 3 weeks, right? You sort of welcome them in your daily life and your daily routine and your daily issues. So it's important that they know that once they arrive, and just, make sure that they know to show respect to staff and above all to refugees, right?
Yeah, I think, as I said at the beginning, there's a structural issue, a problem here, that is that, those lawyers are not migration lawyers. But the feedback that we get and the experience has shown that even though there's a ramp-up phase, it's still worthwhile, right? If they stay at least 3 weeks. 2 weeks would not be enough, or it would be marginally enough. 1 week would be too little, too few, too short. Just because you need to get acquainted with things. But so 3 weeks makes it worthwhile in itself. Now, we try to do our best to make sure that the ramp-up stage is as short as possible. And so we get very efficient briefings from highest. That's one thing, and that's the most important thing, of course. But we also integrate the feedback that we get from returnees. We have our own brochure. We have briefing calls. We have, whenever someone departs, he gets a briefing from the one that just came back. We have a WhatsApp group where all the previous volunteers are connected, and if there is a question, they ask questions, etc. There's also a safety concern in there.
Like, where's the best restaurant close
to
the
that's
office?
The point. Yeah, where. We try to reduce that ramp-up phase as much as possible. But I'm aware that there is a structural issue there, but it doesn't make it unworthwhile. Now, if we could send, and we could think of different ways of allocating slots. Elena, we could discuss that and see whether, for example, we could have 1 week overlap and then send 2 or 3 over 2 months, and then a 1 month or 1 or 2 months break, and then again, or something like that. I mean, there's maybe other ways even to improve that. But yeah.
And there's certain things that you're not an expert on refugee law, but there's certain things that lawyers can do.
Yeah.
Whatever their expertise is. I mean, I'm not a lawyer myself. I've worked with them for many years, so it's. But for example, like taking down a first sort of social history or taking a testimony from something on events that happened is something that any lawyer can do, no matter what their expertise is. So it's still obviously very helpful. I mean, it's something that you can overcome.
Yeah. No, I also tend to believe that if you have a clever person, and he's dedicated and he's motivated, you can be useful in a relatively short period of time.
What's the experience level of the lawyers that you're sending, Serge?
Well, it varies, but it's never super juniors. It's always people that have 2 or 3 years of experience. Also, because I'm not sure we want to send someone right out of law school when he's 23 or 22 or 24, right into the battlefield, quote unquote, which is not, as I said, but yeah. So no, it's people that have some experience. We also tend to, select people that have a certain degree of maturity as well. And then, of course, we look at language skills and all sorts of factors that determine the right profile. A practice group is also not unimportant. I mean, we discussed it just before the panel here. But obviously, people that are in government regulation are better suited than people that are in M&A. But yeah, people with experience, some kind of experience. Yeah.
Well, we are out of time, but I want to say thank you to all three of you. Alina, Serge, and Luke, thank you for being here. Thanks to you guys for hanging in here. We're happy to answer any other questions, but I encourage you to think strategically about detention work outside the box. It's amazing. Have a great night. Enjoy the award ceremony. And I'm told dancing is mandatory tonight, so see you there.
Good.
Thank you.